The fireside is a popular place this time of year, especially for those of you celebrating the 4th of July. But for tonight's true accounts, we are trading the noise for the absolute silence of the deep woods, with only the crackle of the fire for company. Grab the marshmallows and get comfortable. I hope you're ready for this. I've been in search and rescue for 15 years. I've worked floods, blizzards, and forest fires. I've carried people out who were broken, hypothermic, delirious, and 3 who were already gone. But this is by far the one that keeps me up at night. We got the call at 4:37 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in late September. Shoulder season, when the leaves are just starting to crisp, evenings come fast, and people forget how quickly light disappears in the forest. Dispatch flagged it as an overdue party of 2, Daniel Porter and Nate Ruiz, both 20-something, supposed to be back at the South Ridge lot by noon. Their gray Subaru was still there, beads of rain forming on the roof. A short front had pushed through overnight, leaving everything damp and slippery. I was lead for the hasty team that day. That mostly means you move first and think fast, get eyes on trailheads, check obvious spurs, push toward the last known point while the slower, wider net gets organized behind you. Megan and Ellis rounded out our 3-person team. We grabbed a laminated 1x24,000 USGS quad, the park's official trails map, a spare radio, and enough kit to stabilize 2 tired hikers, if that's all it was. Before we stopped off, I ducked into the station to review the log. They had signed in at 8:12 a.m., 2 days prior, planning a 2-night loop, South Ridge to Pine Hollow Loop to North Loop, then back down the fire road to the car. The log was neat, block letters, no gimmicks. Their gear list looked fine: 2-man tent, 40-degree bags, water filter, rain layers. A note in the margin. Printed map variant from pinehollowforum.com. That made me pause. Variant? Megan asked over my shoulder. Probably someone's redrawn lines for a blog, I said, and took a photo of the note with my phone. I've seen some homemade maps. 90% of them are fine. 10% create dangerous situations. We stepped off at 5:05 p.m. The South Ridge Trail starts broad and forgiving, worn smooth by 1,000 weekend boots. It narrows after the 2nd mile into a ribbon through mountain laurel and black birch. Little orange rectangular blazes painted on the bark every 50 yards, telling you you're doing fine. The rain had laid the leaves down, and I cursed that because wet leaves hide tracks. Still, we found a few. Vibram lugs with a distinctive triangle cutout. 2 pairs, side by side. They matched the kind of new boots you buy for your first serious trip. I radioed in a bearing and approximate distance to base. Hasty, moving north-northwest on South Ridge. Mile marker 2.8. 2 sets of tracks consistent with subjects. Copy. Came Judy's voice at ICP. Incident command post. Calm, clipped. Hounds en route. Type 3 team staging at Fire Road Gate C. WX holds clear until 0100. At 6:10 p.m., we hit a small flat with a stone ring. First night's camp. The charcoal in the ring fell apart when I poked it with a stick. Cold by at least 12 hours. A little piece of silver mylar sparked in the duff. Corner of a snack wrapper. There were 2 depressions where a tent had been. In the mud near the ring were 2 heel prints with that triangle cutout. Good sign. Direction of travel was away from camp toward Pine Hollow. Routine, I told myself. We moved. By 6:40 p.m., daylight was thinning. The ridge squeezed us into a shallow defile. Pines sloping up to our left, a rock face to our right. I noticed it before I understood it. My brain waited for a birdsong between our footfalls, and it never came. Hold, I said. We stopped. All sound collapsed to our breathing and the faint squelch of wet dirt under our boots. No wind, no insects, not even that background hum you stop noticing until it's gone. Alice moved his tongue like he was trying to pop his ears. Feels like we're inside a room. I checked the trees. The orange blazes continued ahead, perfectly placed on trunks 15 to 20 inches across. I could see 3 in a line, the way trail crews do it, but something in me shifted weight from my heels to my toes. The hair on my arms rose like I'd walked under a high voltage line. Keep moving, I said, softer than I meant to. 20 minutes later, the orange rectangle stopped. You get used to gaps. Sometimes a blowdown hides a blaze. Sometimes a lazy painter skips a section, but there's usually a ghost of thread to follow. Compacted dirt, a sense of passage. The path under our feet kept going. Clear as day, 24 inches wide. Mineral soil showing through the leaf duff. It even cut a bench across a slope like a proper trail. Only, our official maps said the south ridge turned east here, dropping toward the creek. The path we were on held north and a touch west. I unfolded the USGS quad against my knee. We were where the contour lines pinched, neck of the ridge. The printed trail should swing right. The line on paper did. The tread underfoot did not. Anyone see an old blaze? Megan asked, scanning deeper on both sides. Negative, Alice said, pivoting slowly. Looks clean. I pulled my phone out and scrolled to the photo of the log note. Pine Hollow Forum. The idea itched me. The same itch I get when a homeowner says they've turned off the main breaker, and I can still feel current in the panel. I waved us forward, following the tread we could see. Maybe the reroute hadn't been updated. Maybe I'd send a polite email to the trail crew later. We found a second camp at 7:15 p.m. It crouched into a shallow bowl, ringed with saplings. The tent was canvas and old style, A-frame, patched with duct tape gone gummy at the edges. A tin cup sat on a stump, a mosquito floating in it. There were no footprints newer than last week's rain. The stump bore a half-burned brand I didn't recognize. 2 slashes and a line like someone trying to make a rune and failing. Not theirs, Megan said. Not ours, I said. We don't allow canvas in wilderness anyway. What's it doing here? Alice lifted the cup, sniffed, and grimaced. Smells like nothing. Old metal. I keyed my radio. ICP, hasty. Found an old unauthorized camp. Canvas A-frame. Looks at least a season old. Coordinates. I glanced at the GPS on my shoulder strap. The numbers held steady, but felt like they were pinning us to a place that wasn't quite true. Stand by for UTMs. Static crackled and swallowed Judy's reply. I tilted the handset toward the open bowl and got a whisper of, "Uppy, hasty, weather." Then nothing. The path out of the bowl continued north-northwest. At 7:40 p.m., the forest dimmed past twilight into early night. We switched to red lenses and headlamps, not wanting to blow the world open with white beams yet. Our cones adjusted. The tread kept behaving like a trail. A bench cut here, a rock-armored seep there. Features you only get when people with pull-skis and McLeods work through rock and clay on purpose. And yet the map on my knee didn't agree. According to USGS, to our west lay a chunk of blank green. No contour anomalies, no old logging roads, no dotted, unmaintained lines. According to my eyes, someone had carved a polite footpath through it. We found them at 8:10 p.m. They were sitting side by side on a downed maple, packs off, knees up. The beam from my headlamp found a face, and the face flinched like I'd slapped it. Daniel's lips were white around the edges, split in the middle. Nate's hand shook so badly, the headlamp he held jittered like a bad strobe. "Daniel, Nate," I called, lowering my tone. "I'm Ranger Keeley. These are Rangers Barnes and Ellis. Are you guys okay?" Daniel blinked at me. He took a breath, but it only got halfway. "You're real?" he asked, and it wasn't a joke. "We're real," Megan said, crouching. "You hurt? Any chest pain? Dizziness?" Nate shook his head too fast. We're just tired," he said, but his voice wobbled like he was holding something damned between his teeth. "Walk me through your last 24 hours, I said. "Keep them talking, keep the world anchored." "We camped the first night at South Ridge, Mile 3, Daniel said. "It was fine. Yesterday morning we took the connector, the one on the map." He glanced at Nate, who tugged a laminated sheet from his cargo pocket with fingertips like they belonged to someone else. I took it. Pine Hollow Forum in a serif font in the corner. The lines were clean. The topo base was USGS accurate, but the Pine Hollow loop had grown an extra arm. A green line budded off the northern edge and curled into the blank of the quad. "Where'd you get this one?" I asked. "Thread called Secret Connector," Nate said. "Bunch of people said it made the loop less crowded, that it was quieter." My skin tightened. "And after you took it, we started seeing trees with marks," Daniel said. "Not blazes, like tallies, groups of 5. At first it was 1 or 2, then there were more. It was like we were counting something, and we didn't know what we were counting. We kept saying it was just logging marks, except there were no stumps." "Any water?" Megan asked. "How much have you had today?" "Half a liter each," Nate said. We were trying to ration." The creek sounded close, but it didn't. It wasn't there when we got to where it should have been. I put a hand out. "Let's get you up. We're gonna backtrack to the official loop. It's slower, but simpler in the dark. Can you walk?" They nodded and stood, and that's when Daniel flinched and looked over his shoulder into the trees, head snapping like he'd heard his name hissed behind him. "You okay?" I asked. He stared into the stand for 2 long heartbeats, his breath whispering out. "You did it." He started, then swallowed. "Never mind." "Say it," I said, but I kept my voice low, as if the volume mattered. It sounded like footsteps, but not on leaves, on dirt, there. Megan squeezed his shoulder. "You're safe with us," she said. "It's what we say, and we don't have an explanation we like." We started moving. I set the compass to 140 degrees, a back bearing that should have pulled us cleanly toward Pine Hollow Loop. According to the official map, the tread we were on wanted to hold north. Every junction, even Lazy S-curve, it tugged that way. The compass needle seemed uncommitted, as if the red point had grown tired of its job and would prefer to wander a degree or 2 before settling. The radio stayed sullen, a little burst of static when I keyed, and nothing more. At 9:05 p.m., the world went quiet. Not just evening quiet, the kind of silence that makes you aware of the wet in your own mouth and the slide of your shirt against your shoulder blades. I looked at Megan and saw the exact moment her ears registered the difference. She widened her eyes a bit. Ellis rolled his jaw. "It did this earlier," Nate whispered, "before we saw the old tent." "Keep moving," I said. The tread dipped into a shallow draw and climbed the other side on a series of hand-cut steps. Someone had fit rocks like teeth to hold the dirt. I taught volunteers how to do that on 27 different Saturdays. I could have named the crew leader who liked that style, but no one in our district had been authorized to build anything in this quadrant in 7 years. We came to a stream we couldn't see. We heard it first, not a trickle, but a steady riffle like water over stone. We angled toward it. Relief loosened the set of everyone's shoulders. The sound grew. Then I swung my headlamp, and the beam washed a dry gully. There, rocks sitting vagrant and quiet, in a bed that hadn't run water since spring. Love that, Ellis muttered. Humor flat as a nail. Daniel touched my sleeve. I know how it sounds, he whispered. We tried to follow it by sound, and we kept not finding it. But you can hear it, right? I hear something, I said, because I did. Except it felt like the sound was taking a shortcut around our ears. Let's cut, I decided. We're leaving this tread. We're gonna bushwhack east until we hit the official loop or the fire road. 400 meters, worst case. Copy, Megan said. Relief, plain in the word. Trails are comfortable. Off-trail work is decisive. If a path won't let you leave, you make your own. We tore the Velcro off our gaiters, buttoned cuffs, and shouldered through mountain laurel. The duff was slick, but no misleading turns in the trail, just as the crow flies. I took a bearing and kept it, counting paces. At 300, my shirt clung cold to my spine. The silence followed us like we were dragging it, a bubble that moved when we did. At 350 paces, the laurel broke open onto what looked like an old skid road. 2 parallel bare tracks with grass between, the signature of decades-old logging. My headlamp picked out a rotting rut cut into the red clay, dotted with deer prints. On the left rut, someone had built a cairn, a neat stack of 7 flat stones with one smaller triangle perched on top. Not ours. We don't stack stones except at river crossings, and even then, we try to avoid it because they breed. People see a cairn and feed it like a stray cat until it gets too heavy and topples. This wasn't here earlier, Megan said. We didn't come this way earlier, Ellis said, but doubt made the last word go up at the end. I crouched at the cairn and ran my fingers along the top stone. It was tarry, a smear of black on my glove. Pitch, Megan asked. Old pine sap, I said. I touched the triangle. It wiggled and settled. Someone had placed it recently. The skid road pulled right, which was congruent with where the official fire road should be if we popped out where I thought we had. We walked its spine, and after 5 minutes, we saw it. The cut, gravelly and wide. A double-track, proper road with a galvanized gate pole to the south. I could have hugged the ugly thing. My radio crackled as we left the edge of the trees. Judy's voice came through the static like a boat surfacing. Steve, say again. ICP, hasty. 3 subjects moving south on Fire Road between gates C and D. 2 ambulatory, 1 mildly dehydrated. Request pickup at gate C in 20. Copy hasty, Judy said, and I heard genuine relief. Unit 4 will meet you. The silence broke like a film popped. Crickets ticked up from 0 to a chorus. A barred owl called from the middle canopy, indignant. Leaves clattered in a wind I hadn't felt on my face until that moment. Daniel sagged like someone cut a line attached to his chest. We're good, I told them. You did the hard part by staying alive. Back under fluorescence at the station, I asked for the map. Nate handed it over willingly, as if he was happy to have it leave his person. I laid it next to the USGS quad and sat my desk lap over it. Side by side, they were identical in paper size, scale, and the bones of the thing. Ridges, contour intervals, water courses, but where the official map held green nothing, the forum map sprouted an extra line. It was so precise, it made me angry. It crossed contours sensibly, not too steep. It braided through draws where a good trail would. It even used a little squiggle symbol for a footbridge over a feeder stream that on my quad didn't exist. What was the forum thread? I asked. Pinehollow.com, Nate said. The user was mhollow77 with a pinecone icon. It looked legit. Did you screenshot the page? I asked. He shook his head, sheepish. We printed the map. Figured we'd be off-grid anyway. Any comments, warnings? Folks just said it was quiet, that it was their favorite. Best kept secret, one said. Another said the Rangers don't advertise it because they want to keep crowds off. Stuff like that. I copied the URL into a notepad. Then I took the map to the big multifunction scanner in the back room and ran it under the glass. The software interpreted it as a photograph, and the CCD bar stuttered across. Jude, I said, can we push this to HQ? I want an overlay with LiDAR and historical logging maps. Something's off. Already emailed the alert, Judy said. Also, hounds hit nothing on your path. They didn't like the old canvas site either. Wouldn't go in. Ears went flat. Handler had to heal them. Great, I said. We sent the hikers to urgent care for fluids and blood work. Both were fine physically. They didn't want to file a formal report. They didn't want to talk about the strain. When I asked Daniel in the hallway, just us, no forms, what he'd thought was behind him when he kept looking back, he shook his head once and said, I don't think it was a who, which is not a sentence I can use in any official paperwork. I tried to go back 2 days later. I took Ellis, 2 more from the trail crew, and a coil of flagging tape. We returned to where the trailblazers had run out. Under clean blue skies and a noon sun, the orange rectangles did exactly what the USGS said they should. They turned east. The tread followed, a little eroded in the switchback, a place I'd walked 100 times and never been surprised by. Was it here? One of the crew asked, squinting where the knot blazes should have been. Right where your eyes keep trying to slide, I said, and then I realized my eyes were, in fact, sliding, as if they'd been given a magnet to follow. I forced myself to look where the unofficial path had held. There was nothing, not even an animal run, no bent grass. My fingertips tingled with the urge to set a blaze where one had been. We found the bowl where the old canvas had been. It was just a shallow depression. No stump, no ring, no tin cup with a mosquito. I kicked the duff just to hear a normal sound. Back at my desk that evening, I typed pinehollowforum.com into a browser. The domain loaded a generic forum board, gear reviews, photo threads, trip reports. I typed secret connector into the search bar. The first result was a thread titled that 8 years ago. 27 comments. The top post by user mhollow77 had a broken image icon in it, a little sad rectangle with a folded corner. A later comment said, link dead, can someone mirror? The rest was people arguing about gatekeeping and whether rangers hide trails from the public. I clicked mhollow77's username. The profile was bare, last active 7 years ago. I tried the Wayback Machine and found a snapshot from a summer in which the image loaded. A small embedded map with a green line where I knew it would be. The pinned reply under it read, this changed my life. My wife and I go there every fall. Always so quiet. Thank you. The user's avatar was a pine cone. I sent the Wayback link to the state park police with a note. Possible liability issue. Unauthorized building. Request to trace IP to see if mhollow77 was a former volunteer. I got a polite canned reply and then silence. We have 4 rangers and 1,000 square miles to think about. There are always more immediate fires. Of course, I went back. When you're a ranger long enough, you develop a list of places you check on, like an old neighbor you don't particularly like. but can't quite leave alone. I timed the walk so I would reach it late afternoon, because I wanted to test out whether the timing mattered. It did. The late light lay in long yellow panes across the pines. I stepped under the notch, and the sound thinned again, like someone turned a knob down 2 clicks. I stood where the false blazers had been. I closed my eyes. I didn't move my feet. I pictured the map from 2 nights ago, the illicit green line curling north. I opened my eyes and saw one orange rectangle where it should be. Then my focus softened. My eyes caught on nothing, and for the space of a heartbeat, there was a smear of lighter soil in the leaf duff, where a tread would be if there were one. Behind me, leaves shifted. I turned, slow, deliberate. A squirrel launched itself from one trunk to another, offended by my attention. Fine, I said quietly to the ridge, to whatever had watched us. Keep your secret. People ask sometimes, usually on a tour or at a community outreach table, if the old stories are true, the ones about staircases in the woods that go nowhere, or whistles you should never answer. I don't feed them. I tell them to bring a map with declination marked, 2 liters of water, a light even if they think they'll be home for dinner, and to stay on site established trails. I tell them the wilderness doesn't owe us signage or sense. It was here long before our lines on paper, and it'll be here when the paper rots. I kept thinking about the silence that seemed to move with us, about the canvas tent in the bowl and how the cup smelled like nothing, the knot water and the cairn with pitch black under my glove. I think about the user with the pinecone avatar and the comment that said, always so quiet. A month later, on a hasty for a trail runner who'd sprained his ankle, we cut across the north loop to save time. The runner was fine and grateful, and talked without pausing for 20 minutes about his training plan and electrolytes. When we dropped him off at the South Ridge trailhead and handed him off to his friend, I went through the standard debrief with Megan and Ellis. Everything was normal, the way it should be after a clean rescue. But as we walked back to the truck, Megan said it quietly. Keely, did you notice how quiet it got for a minute when we cut past the North Fork? I hadn't noticed, not consciously, but when she said it, the memory clicked. A brief lull in the trail runner's monologue, where all sound seemed cushioned. No leaves moving, no birds, just his labored breathing and the soft crunch of gravel. Ellis had noticed too, apparently. Thought I was imagining it. Same as before, yeah? Like someone pressed pause on the woods. We all stood there in the gravel lot for a moment longer than necessary before climbing in. Nobody suggested going back up to check. None of us wanted to. That night, I pulled up the forum again. The secret connector thread had disappeared entirely. It wasn't even in the cached list of threads in the fall hiking sub-forum. I checked the way back snapshot I'd saved. Still there. Still the green line where it shouldn't be. But when I clicked on the image this time, the link was broken. Not page not found. Just gone. 2 weeks later, HQ assigned me to lead a junior ranger orientation. I brought the official maps, pointed out the usual hazards, steep grades, washed out bridges, black bear sightings, and when we got to public contact, I told them the most important thing I could. If someone shows you a map with a trail you've never seen on ours, don't argue, don't agree. Just ask where they got it, and if they've been there before, and then make a note, a good, clear one. Some trails are only real when they want to be. They laughed. They thought I was being colorful, adding a little local ranger folklore. And maybe I was. But every now and then, Something odd will happen that reminds me of that day's events, but I choose not to investigate anymore. It was early October, that strange in-between time when summer's warmth has drained from the air, and hiking in the cool temperatures is much more pleasant. The sky was bright blue that day, and I was admiring the golden aspens, deep green pine, the gray-white twist of granite in the distance. I took my camera with me. The ranger had smiled as I signed the trail register. "You probably won't see another soul out there today," she said. "Enjoy it while you can. Snow's coming soon." That was exactly why I was here. I love that fleeting moment before the cold months arrive, when the crowds are gone and the sounds of nature win over the usual noise of tourists and fair-weather hikers. The loop was 10 miles total, with a ridge overlook at mile 6. The only access point was the trailhead where I parked, a dirt lot with space for maybe 6 cars. Mine was the only one there. I locked up, checked my pack, and set off. The first 3 miles climbed gently through pine and aspen. The forest was alive with the slow rustle of falling leaves, each one spinning down like it was in no hurry to land. Somewhere around mile 4, the trailhead leveled beside a narrow stream, snowmelt fed, cold enough to sting. I knelt to refill my filter bottle, the icy water biting into my fingertips. That's when I saw him. He was standing upstream, partly hidden by willow shrubs. Tall, maybe late 40s, faded green jacket, jeans, baseball cap, no backpack, no water bottle. His hands were in his pockets. He was just standing there, watching me. Our eyes met. He smiled and started walking toward me. "Hey," he called out, voice light but carrying easily over the water. "Am I glad to see someone? I think I'm lost." The words were casual, but something in my gut shifted. You don't get lost here without gear, not this far in. I smiled back. "Where do you come from?" He gestured vaguely behind him. "Been wandering for hours. Keep going in circles. Mind if I follow you out?" 6 miles back the way I came. 4 miles forward to the ridge, then another 6 back to the trailhead. Either way, a long time alone with someone I didn't trust. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "But I'm taking the long way, doing the whole loop." Something in his expression flickered, almost too quick to catch. "That's fine," he said, and fell in behind me. Not beside me, behind. For the next half hour, his footsteps trailed mine. When he spoke, it was to ask questions that pried instead of passing the time. "You come here often? Live nearby? Who knows you're out here today?" I lied easily. First time, out of state. Plenty of people knew. We reached a fork. Left, climbed toward the ridge overlook. Right, cut back toward the trailhead. I pulled my map from my pack. "We can cut back here," I said, pointing right, or keep going to the ridge. He looked down a short route for a long moment, then smiled. "Let's do the long way. It's quieter." The word landed wrong. "I think I'll head back," I said lightly. "You can keep going your way." For the first time, the smile didn't come. His face was blank, eyes unreadable. He shrugged. "Guess I'll go my way then." We split. I walked steadily, resisting the urge to look back. 10 minutes later, I quickened my pace. Somewhere behind the wind and the crunch of leaves, I thought I heard another set of footsteps. Slower now, matching my pauses. By mile 9, I was moving fast enough that my breathing came ragged. The trailhead appeared, my car still alone in the lot. I slid inside, locked the doors, and started the engine. My eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, and I jumped. My heart flipped over in my chest. At the far edge of the lot, just inside the tree line, stood a figure in a faded green jacket and baseball cap. He didn't react. He just stood there, watching. I gripped the wheel and drove away. At the ranger station, I reported him. The ranger looked worried as I explained what had happened. When I mentioned he had no pack, she looked surprised and said that there was no camping permitted in that section. She picked up the radio and spoke in a low, clipped voice. I called to see if they had any news. They hadn't seen any sign of him, and because it was low season, no other reports from hikers. I keep checking the headlines because I'm terrified the same thing could happen to someone who doesn't manage to make their way out, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm 21 and live in a village just outside of the big city. This village is located on a large wooded area. There is a place where my friends and I often come to smoke or drink in the evening. We call it Nature Spot. It is a wooded dune-like area with a large island in the middle. To get to this island, you have to cross a small wooden bridge. The nearest houses are quite far away, about a kilometer from the place. So at night, it is a quiet, dark place. In the winter, it is bare, wet, and muddy, and nobody really comes there. This happened a couple of months ago. That Friday night, all of my friends couldn't hang out. I don't have that many friends, and I wanted to go to the island to smoke and drink by myself. I don't mind hanging out alone on occasions like this. Sometimes I enjoy it when no one else is around me, and it's just myself and nature and weed. I know the place well, and I carry a knife with me just in case. I always do it when I go out alone in the woods at night. I'm not a scared person. I often walk through the woods at night with headphones and my music at the loudest. I do this to create some tension, because my life has been pretty boring the past few months, and every time I go there, especially at night with weed and drink, I always get an excited gut feeling, just to be there all alone, in the dark, on that island. So I walk through the wooded area towards the island. It's now around 12:30 at night. I have nothing to do tomorrow, so I hang around the place a bit. Before I cross the bridge, I take my headphones off to listen to see if I can hear any sounds coming from the island, just in case if there's anyone on the island. After a few minutes, hoping that I was alone, I plan to smoke a joint at a tree in the middle of the island that we call the Witch's Tree. This is because in the winter, it looks like the Blair Witch movie setting. I walk onto the island towards the Witch's Tree with music on. I walk towards the tree, and at the same time coming up to the tree, I see a naked man around 30 to 40 years old, standing on a log that's pretty high from the ground, right in front of me. He's looking down on me. He stood in a literal T-pose in the dark, all naked when I spotted him, which made me really scared. It was just a flash second before my heart dropped and I jumped back immediately, and my headphones fell from my head into my hands. I screamed out, "What the fuck, man?" out of sheer panic, and I jog backwards while keeping my eyes on the dark pathway. At this point, my whole body is filled with fear and adrenaline. I did not know what to do or say, so I yelled while jogging back. "I saw you. Come to me. Come to me. I have a knife," because he looked like he was ready to chase me. I have used this tactic before, especially in forested areas encountering homeless people or suspicious people at night. Nowhere near this location, where I yell out to come to me, because it creates this kind of psychological reaction where I invite the perpetrator to come my way instead of showing fear or freezing. I only do this when I carry a knife, and of course I'm not going to stab someone. I would only do that if I really, really had to. But I was still really scared, so now I'm at the bridge, and at first, I think it's a really drugged out homeless person who's fucked up. I do believe in the paranormal, but I've never experienced anything paranormal, or anything really like this ever. So I said to myself, it's a homeless person. But I doubted myself very much at that moment. I thought I was going to die or get stabbed for a brief moment, because even though he might be homeless, who the fuck goes tree climbing in the middle of the night naked, and also says nothing when spotted? Now I'm standing on the other side of the bridge, shaking and waiting. I wanted to make sure I wasn't followed before I ran. I wanted to call my friend to tell him that there's a naked guy at the tree. He would have answered and come. At this moment, out of the dark from the other side of the bridge, the naked guy is walking toward me. Literally out of nowhere. My heart dropped. Yes, he was naked, but what was even scarier was his face and eyes. In the moonlight, he looked like a zombie, and he had his arms straight up when he walked out of the bush, like he was caught by the police or something. He walked over the bridge towards me, his arms straight up, which was a really scary sight, and also because the bridge is really wobbly. He had no support in terms of firmness or balance. It was almost impossible to get over it without holding onto both railings. But this man literally just walked straight ahead without any drop or stop. It was like he was walking over water. I run back while shouting, "What the fuck are you doing?" Then he starts screaming like a drug addict and starts running towards me. I quickly run away through the dark forest to the park, where there were houses close by. There's like a 5-minute walk of a dark pathway, and while sprinting down, I could hear him sprint after me, and literally saying he was going to eat me if he caught up to me. Just the thought of a naked man running after me in the dark, and also what happened before, made me run so fast. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. It made me totally forget about my knife. I stumbled and fell face first in a thorny bush, and I was lost for a few seconds while listening to this man's scream get louder and louder. But I was so terrified, and I had so much adrenaline, and everything unfolded really fast. I ripped my jacket and lost my second bike keys. I made it home and couldn't sleep. Homeless people in the Netherlands do not behave like this one did. I've never seen or heard stories about homeless people moving like that, or anything. These are stories you hear mainly from America, where homeless people are on Flocka or something, and turn into literal zombies. Those are the vibes I got from this incident. The next morning, a friend and I went back to the island after I told him what had happened. When we got there, I remember standing on the bridge and throwing stones towards the bush to see if the man was still there, and the bridge was so bumpy that we could hardly get to the other side. So for that man to walk at a pace like his, with his hands in the air, crossing the bridge, was very unusual. We couldn't find any clothing, mattresses, or anything that showed that someone had slept there on that island, or even stayed there. I have never been back to that island. A few days ago, I saw what looked like the same man hiding behind a tree from a woman who was walking her dog in the park when I cycled past. He seemed possessed. He was talking to the tree while he was hiding from people, and he only had a blanket to cover himself. After seeing this, I thought back to that night and decided to tell the story and share it here. I did end up finding out that he'd escaped from a mental institution not far from where I live. The police are still looking for him. The moment my hair stood on end, I knew I was in trouble. I was 12,000 feet up, alone, with no cover for half a mile, and the sky had just turned against me. The first lightning strike hit so close that the world lit up for a second, and that's when I realized I might not make it back. I hike alone because it's the only way my mind ever really shuts off. I do it right. Route shared with a friend, extra food, extra layers, 2 weather checks before I leave. That August morning had looked perfect. Cool air, deep blue sky, and a forecast that gave only a 10% chance of storms. Eagle's Crown sits just shy of 12,000 feet. The first 6 miles rise through thick lodgepole and limber pine, switchback after switchback, until the air thins and the trees fall away. The last stretch is low scrub, lichen-covered rock, and ridges you can walk like a balance beam. Up there, you can see the weather coming from 50 miles away. When I broke through the timberline around 15 feet, the horizon was still clear, except for a faint smudge far to the west. At first it was nothing, just a dark smear under the sunlight. By the time I reached the summit at 11, it had thickened into a layered wall. The air had shifted too, colder, sharper, with that faint metallic tang that only ever means rain or worse. I didn't linger. I took a few photos, ate half a granola bar, and turned to start down. The first low roll of thunder reached me as I began picking my way over the loose scree. Lightning is the #1 killer in Colorado backcountry, and above the tree line, you are the tallest thing around. You don't waste time when the storm hits. The descent was slow. Every step on the wet scree wanted to send me skating. The wind was building, pressing against me as though it meant to hold me there, and the clouds had gone from gray to a heavy, swollen black. Then the first bolt hit close enough for the hair on my arms to lift. The flash was blinding, the crack immediate, sharp enough to make my ears ring. I dropped my profile and kept moving, not running, not giving in to the urge to bolt, because running on wet scree would just break an ankle and leave me stranded. I aimed for a gully I'd spotted on the way up. It wasn't perfect. Gullies can funnel water and even electricity, but it led down into stunted crumhulse pines and scrub willow. Anything was better than being a lightning rod on the ridge. By then, the water was coming in sideways, soaking me in seconds. The scree had turned slick under my boots, so I lowered myself in a crouch, planting poles before every step. Lightning detonated overhead. No roll, just blinding light and a shockwave that rattled the air in my chest. The air itself felt charged, pressing on my eardrums. I scrambled into the gully, using roots and willows to steady myself. Water was already threading between the rocks, slicking everything. I stayed low, shoulders hunched, moving quickly but not recklessly. The first pines appeared at 12:03, their trunks twisted and wind-battered, but blessedly taller than me. Relief hit hard, but I didn't stop. I kept moving deeper until the canopy knit over my head, and the flashes dimmed to a white glow through the branches. Only then did the thunder begin to roll instead of slam. My ears rang, my thighs shook from the constant bracing, and my breath was short, thin from fear and altitude. I layered up before the cold could seep in, forced down the rest of my granola bar, and sipped water slowly. Under the trees, the rain softened to a steady hiss on the needles. The forest smelled of sap and wet stone, grounding me in the here and now. By the time I reached the trailhead at 1:40, the storm had already moved on. The parking lot shone with puddles under a perfect blue sky. Anyone arriving then would never believe the ridge had been a war zone an hour earlier. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, the shake finally catching up with me. That day taught me something I already knew, but it never felt so sharply. In the high country, a 10% storm chance means nothing. Clouds can build faster than you think, and the mountain doesn't negotiate. In 2017, I was in Northern Ireland for a college field trip. My religious studies class was visiting stone circles throughout Northern Ireland and Ireland to focus on religious geography. On this particular day, I think we were visiting the Beckmore stone circles. It was a normal cloudy day, and we were enjoying learning the history of the Bronze Age wonder, excitedly waiting to go back to the hotel to begin a new day of pub hopping. I remember the stone circles being separated from the nearby woods with a small wire fence. For some reason, we were hanging around the fence, peering at the woods that lay not 20 yards away. We had yet to go into any woods during our trip, staying mainly at the sites surrounded by farmland. I remember wanting very much to go into this old wood for whatever reason. We all seemed to feel curious about it. I decided to climb over the small wire fence and see if there was anything interesting in the woods. Now, these woods were different than the woods I was used to in North America. The branches were thick, too thick to stand in. I had to bend at the waist to traverse them. The ground was covered in a soft light brown moss, broken up by tree roots. I remember quickly moving under the branches, staring at the ground as to not trip. I felt giddy, like I was a child going somewhere my parents told me not to. I felt light and I began to pick up speed. I suddenly looked up to make sure I wasn't about to run into a tree trunk when something made me stop in my tracks. I saw legs, human legs. I could only see their legs, like someone was standing straight up in the trees. The branches were too thick to stand in, but this person's legs were the only thing visible. I felt an almost animal response of fear that didn't really make sense. I told myself they couldn't see me because I could not see their face, but for some reason, I felt that they knew I was there. Why would someone be out here? We were the only group at the circles, and there were no houses nearby. I looked behind me and realized I was much farther in the woods than I'd thought. I could barely see the light from the place I'd entered. It was so quiet. They had to have heard me approach. My only thought was, I'm closer to them than I am to the entrance. They could get me before I make it out. I was only standing there, bent over for no more than a minute, but it felt like forever. I didn't see them move, but I could tell they were facing toward me, not away. I now really felt like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Only this time, instead of giddy, I felt nauseous, as if I was a deer and they, a hunter. I turned and bolted. I flew through those trees, still bent over to avoid collision. I didn't look down this time, stumbling as fast as I could, just focused on the light at the end of the trees. I felt branches pull my hair and clothes as I ran. I couldn't hear anything over my own breathing. As soon as I broke the tree line, I felt a weight lift. The group standing at the fence looked startled by me bursting out of the woods. I told them I think I saw someone, but it almost felt wrong to talk about. We left soon after. I don't know what I think it was. Was it a person hanging out deep in the forest? Was it a fae, a spirit, the Green Man? All I know is that it felt otherworldly. I live outside of the United States. About 15 years ago, I went to visit family in the US for a family reunion, so we had to find accommodation for everyone. I stayed with my grandmother, while others found alternative places to stay. A man who lived close to my grandmother offered to let my brother and his wife stay with him. He had a 3-bedroom house, and he lived alone, so he said he would be happy to let them stay in a spare bedroom for free. They happily agreed. I went with them to see what the place was like. My grandmother lived way up in the mountains, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and so did this man, who was a long-haul trucker, by the way. When we pulled up in front of his house, we all talked about how beautiful it was. I wanted to stay there too, and we wondered if he would let me stay in one of his other rooms. That all changed when we entered the house, though. While the place was lovely and clean, there was a horrible stench. It stank of rotting meat and solvents, with a touch of air freshener thrown in. We could not get away from the smell. The room that they would be staying in was accessed through a sliding glass door. The view was amazing. The smell was not, nor was the locked door that led to the rest of the house. There were 2 sturdy locks on the door, a deadbolt and a padlock. It was a bit disconcerting to note that they were there to lock something or someone in addition to keeping people out. When my brother asked about the locks on the door, the long-haul trucker said, "I have cats. I don't like them to get out. There are mountain lions and opossums and eagles around here." My brother later told me that he thought about joking, "How big are your cats?" But he thought that might not be a good idea. To access the kitchen, we had to go back outside, walk around to the other end of the house, and go in another door there. While the long-haul trucker was telling my brother and sister-in-law to feel free to use anything in the kitchen and living room, I had a look at the inner door that led into the living room. Sure enough, there was a deadbolt and padlock on it. Of course, the stink was really bad there too. Despite all of this, my brother and sister-in-law stayed there for a week. They stayed out of that place for as long as possible, only returning to sleep. My brother said that the guy was weird, but he didn't think that anything horrible was going on. He probably doesn't clean up after his cats, he said. Cat food smells like that when it's left out too long. We saw the cats while we were there, so that was a possibility. But what struck me as odd was the fact that the cats were out and free roaming. One was even outside. My brother and sister-in-law had no other problems during their stay there, though. A couple of years later, I went back to visit my grandmother on my own. The long-haul trucker came over to her house, and after we'd all talked for a while, he brought up my brother's previous visit. "I just want to say sorry for how bad the house smelled back then," he said, "and I want you to know that it's all cleaned up now." This struck me as strange, because we hadn't talked about the smell at all. When I said that there was no need to apologize to me because I hadn't stayed there, he got upset. "No, it wasn't good," he said, "and I want you to see that it's all cleaned up now. You should come over and see it." I assured him that I believed that he really had cleaned up, and I didn't need to see it. He kept insisting that I go over to see it, though. My grandmother insisted on it too, so I went with the guy to see it. He continued to insist that I see every room in his house, and fawning over me. It just felt weird. His house was very clean, though, and the locks were gone. The cats were still there. Also, I should mention that this guy had also tried to entice my niece to go over to his house on another occasion. He kept telling her about his private gym and all the equipment he had over there. He kept saying, "You can ride on my exercise bike. You can ride it as much as you want." When I said that she was probably too little for his stationary bike because she was 8 years old and he was a large man, he said that he could adjust it. So I said that I was interested in seeing a stationary bike that could adjust like that. He said, "Oh, that's okay. You don't need to see it. My house is a mess anyway." Then he continued to ask my niece if she wanted to play on his exercise bike. When I called her mother's attention to this, the long-haul trucker stopped asking. My grandmother passed away years ago, and while I miss her dearly, I don't miss having to deal with that guy. I have always been an avid mountain person. When people say they go to the beach for vacation, I respect it, but I prefer the mountains 100%. Something about these old giants has always fascinated me, as if I just cannot avoid but to be drawn towards them and be in awe when hiking on them. Over my short life, a 21-year-old student, I consider that I've seen a fair amount of mountain ranges in Europe, from the Alps in Switzerland to the Pyrenees in Spain, and from the Italian Dolomites to the Czech Stoloway Mountains. I have always hiked and camped outdoors a lot, with family and friends, but also by myself. Now, I went to the United States for college, and I have always been tempted to do a part of the Appalachian Trail. From the pictures I saw on the internet, I always wanted to see them in person, and I'm not gonna lie, I must say that the great amount of scary stories of these mountains always attracted me a little as well. I'm definitely not a person who likes scary movies or anything, but I enjoy reading fellow mountaineer experiences, and to be honest, I mostly just read stories about the Appalachian Trail to know how to prep myself for when I was going to do it. The scary stories just got my attention every now and then. That being said, I decided to go this year and do a small part of the Appalachian Trail. I went to do a small part between the borders of Tennessee and North Carolina, with Clingman's Dome being the icing on the cake. I was a little bit hesitant to go by myself, since I'm not very familiar with both the geography as well as the wildlife in this part of the States. I wanted to go with a friend or my girlfriend who's from North Carolina herself, but both my friend and my girlfriend declined because they had to go to work. This was during spring break, so I decided I just had to go by myself, since I'm graduating this year and will return to Europe. I started at this place called Bryson City and walked along the Tuckasegee River until I reached the Nolan Creek trailhead. From there on, I just followed the trail until I would reach Clingman's Dome, and from Clingman's Dome, I would follow the Appalachian Trail for about a week. I had prepared well for this trip. I carried bear spray and pepper spray. I read some freaky stories about people in the Appalachian Trail, and I also brought this hunting knife and an axe for wood. I had some canned food and lots of water, plus a water filter, and for the rest, just my tent and sleeping bag. So, when I started walking from Bryson City and I saw the beautiful aura this mountain range had, I couldn't be happier. I had been wanting to do this since I had arrived here in the US, and I was finally doing it. I encountered some people on the Nolan Creek trailhead who were friendly, but I'd made up my mind I would be better off alone than with strangers. I reached Clingman's Dome the same day and went a little further before I would set up camp. It was beautiful. At night, I slept a bit off the trail with a small campfire while I had dinner, and which I put out before I went to sleep. The first night went really well, as I was so exhausted from the hike to Clingman's Dome. The next 2 days were just as beautiful, and I saw lots of breathtaking views. The people on the Appalachian Trail I encountered were really polite as well. Then, on the third night, I feel like everything took a strange turn. I'd set up my camp just as usual, around 160 feet from the trail. No one was camping close to me, or at least not that I was aware of. While getting dinner, I just had this really weird gut feeling that I was not alone there. I felt as if someone was looking at me from behind a tree or something. I tried to convince myself that I was having an amazing time, that I was safe, and that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I went to sleep and put the fire out as usual. Then, before it was daylight again, I woke up. I woke up with this same gut feeling that, even though I was in my tent, that someone was watching my tent from a distance. I did not hear a single bird, which was weird, because right before daylight is when they start chirping again. I only heard the wind and the leaves. It made me feel uncomfortable, a bit scared even. I didn't fall asleep again, and the first thing in the morning, after having breakfast in my tent, I broke up camp and decided to continue my hike. During my hike, I encountered a few people, and again they were very nice, but I stick to myself. While walking on this part of the trail by myself alone, I felt as if I was being watched again. I even had the feeling as if someone or something was following me. So every now and then, I would stop dead in my tracks in order to hear if it was real. Now, obviously, my mind could be playing tricks, but I would swear that I would hear the steps stop a second after I'd stopped. So, according to me at that moment, someone was following me. I looked around the whole time, and I never saw anyone or anything, which made it even more weird. After the long day of hiking, I made camp, this time closer to the trail than usual. But for some reason, I thought it would be more safe. I again had this gut feeling of being watched while having dinner outside my tent. So I decided to finish my food in my tent and went to the bathroom in a bottle because I did not want to go outside now. I tried to sleep by closing my eyes, but my mind focused on hearing the whole time. And that is when I heard it for the first time. A knock, as if a branch was hitting a tree or a small rock was getting thrown at a tree. Silence followed for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably more like 10 minutes. Then it happened again, this time more clear. I was scared now, and I had no idea where to go since it was dark already. I put on my flashlight in the tent and made myself look as big as I could so that my shadow outside the tent would look bigger because of the light. I don't know why this was my reasoning at the time. I just thought of bears. I held my hunting knife in my hand. Silence followed the second knock, but now I shouted to pierce the silence in the dark. First I shouted that whoever was joking around, I was armed, and I was not wanting to be pranked. I thought this would scare them off. It did not. It was almost as if this person found it even more funny knowing I was pissed at them. I heard another knock, and immediately after a knock on what I assumed to be the opposite side of my tent. So now I was guessing it was 2 people instead of 1, and that they liked to pull a prank on an innocent passerby. I tried to stay up as long as I could, but around 4 a.m., my eyes just gave up, and I drifted off. I woke up at around 8 a.m. again, with the light of the sun being my savior. I first tried to hear if whoever was pranking me was still knocking. I didn't hear anything. I shouted again, stating that I was now going to exit my tent with my knife in my hand, and that whoever had been joking around should make themselves known. I walked out of my tent, and I didn't see anyone. I looked for tracks around my camp, but I could not immediately make something out of it. I decided to get the hell out of there. The next part of my week basically continued being the same. At night, I'd hear some knocks from different directions, and occasionally, I heard what I would guess was a little bit of humming, as if a person was just humming a tune. Now, I never saw anyone except from the occasional hikers on the Appalachian Trail, so I cannot say I saw something weird, but I could never get rid of this weird gut feeling that I was being watched and followed during the rest of my hike on the Appalachian Trail. I'm now back, and I told this to my girlfriend. She said it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me, and I am inclined to believe her because I never saw anything. But I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, thinking that I'm in that tent in the middle of nowhere, and someone is watching me and knocking on a tree. And every time I wake up like this, the thought alone scares me. My girlfriend and I encountered something very strange this weekend. We trail run. It's sort of become our thing. Yesterday, we found a trailhead that was up towards the mountains, about 2 hours away from Seattle. Pretty remote. So we left early and got to the trailhead at 8 a.m. The trail was particularly difficult, steep enough that we found ourselves walking pretty often. In retrospect, we should have been surprised by what we saw next. Midway through our run, on a steep descent, we pass a lone hiker and think absolutely nothing about the encounter. Alone, maybe 65 to 70, and wearing all white. The clothes were modern, looked perfectly placed for today. Hiking pants, vest, hat. She had one hiking pole and a backpack, all white. Again, modern clothes. Didn't stand out as strange. We say hello, and she says nothing back. We were running, so there was nothing rude. We simply ran past her. We continue. It gets harder, but progress nearly 3 miles uphill. We get to a point where the trail becomes an overgrown forest road in a small clearing. At this point, the road begins to get very, very overgrown, so we crest a small ridge, and suddenly we see a hiker. It's been 30 minutes since we saw the older lady in white, yet here was a hiker with the same outfit. There were no forks in our trail, yet we'd swear this was the same person, but that would be impossible, right? The gravity of this didn't hit yet, so strangely we ran past her again. We ran a couple of feet in front at least, because at that point, the road was entirely bushes and not passable. So we turn around. We walked past her a last time. She says something like, "Seems like the trail ends here." It didn't feel eerie, yet, in retrospect, it was eerie. We ran back. Everything seemed normal until we reflected on why this lady was there. How would she have gotten there before us? How could she have even made it there at all? We just ran 5 miles uphill, steep terrain, and so did this 70-year-old lady. It's been a one-way path. There have been no other turns. The trail we were on at that point was completely overgrown, enough that we had to turn around. Why was she there? How did she get there? Was she the same lady? We ran back the same trail. We never ran into the first hiker. This happened several months ago while I was moving cross-country to Las Vegas. I arrived the night before I was supposed to check in and get the keys to my new apartment. I didn't feel it was necessary to get a hotel room, so I decided to sleep for a few hours at a Pilot travel stop and then head to my apartment in the morning. There was a parking area to the side of the building with 3 or 4 rows of spaces. The furthest row was near a fenced-off area. Most of the spots were filled with trucks and vans, likely other drivers who had also stopped to rest. I parked my car in the space closest to the main building, since it had the most light, and decided to get some rest. I'd been asleep in the driver's seat for about an hour when I was suddenly startled awake by the sound of someone walking near my door. I looked over and saw a guy starting to walk away. Then he turned around, saw that I was awake and looking at him. He then gave a little wave and started walking back to my car. He said, "Hey man, sorry to wake you, but my car won't start, and I was wondering if you could give me a jump." I was half awake and, for some reason, just kind of mumbled, "Sure, I guess." He replied, "Great, follow me around." This part was clearly a stupid decision on my part, but I'll continue nonetheless. So, I started my car and drove around to where he was walking. He led me to the far back row of the parking lot, in the back corner near the fence. At this point, I was starting to realize how shady the situation felt. I stopped my car about halfway down the row, thinking, just back up and drive off. This is dangerous. He saw that I'd stopped and started waving at me to pull forward. For some stupid reason, I did, but I kept my windows up and the doors locked. I also grabbed my phone and pepper spray from my carry bag on the passenger seat. As I pulled up, I saw an old, beat-up RV parked next to an even more beat-up pickup truck, which was filled with garbage in the bed. The truck was facing the fence, with the back toward the parking row where I was. The guy was standing near the front of the truck, waving jumper cables and signaling me to pull closer. The way the truck and RV were positioned, there was barely enough space for a car to squeeze between them. Suddenly, a woman stepped out of the RV and began signaling for me to pull up as well. At this point, I was completely suspicious and freaked out. I shouted out the window, "No, I'm not pulling in there. If the cables can't reach, you'll have to find someone else." She got angry and started screaming at me to pull up, and then the guy ran over to her, yelling at her to shut up and get back inside the RV. He then walked over to the driver's side of my car and said, "Just pull up closer to the truck so I can hook the cables up, and we'll be done." By that point, everything about the situation felt off, and I said, "No, I'm not going to be able to help with this." He gave me an irritated look and said, "Seriously, I've got to get to my mother's house. She's not feeling too well, you know." I replied, "I need to go," and started backing out of the parking area to leave the station. As I was pulling away, I saw the woman come back out of the RV and start shouting at the man, pointing toward my car. I couldn't tell what she was saying, but I got out of there quickly and found another location closer to the city to spend the rest of the night. I don't know if they genuinely needed help or if it was a setup for something more dangerous, but I immediately regretted the decisions I made. It was clear the situation could have taken a very bad turn. It sounds crazy, and if I wasn't with someone who also witnessed it, I would think I was hallucinating it. Anyway, onto the true story that happened around 15 years ago. A friend and I decided to go to a diner for a late-night meal. We were both home, and one of us texted the other to see if they wanted to come eat. I ended up driving, and I picked up my friend, and we went to a diner in Fort Lee, New Jersey. We went to this particular diner because my friend was friends with someone who used to work there. Anyway, we were both disappointed in our food. It was poorly made by New Jersey diner standards. Neither of us finished our meal and decided to head home. While driving, I got distracted by our conversation on how bad the food was and made the right turn too early. I turned into Route 4 and wanted Route 46 instead. Since we were in no rush, neither of us thought it was a big deal. I saw an exit to Grand Avenue, which is where we wanted to go from Route 46, so I took it. It didn't take us where we were expecting. I thought maybe if we kept driving, we would eventually pass through a part of Grand Avenue we recognized. We quickly realized we were in an odd place. I say this because we were driving in the woods. This part of New Jersey is right outside of New York City, and is very developed. As we're driving, we see an abandoned car to the left of us. The car didn't look old or beat up. We were questioning why someone would leave their car there. Then suddenly we see a police car up ahead. I figured we would go to the officer and ask for directions, or at least find out where we were. As we approach the police car, we notice all the lights are on and the driver's side door was open. We saw no one around us and started seriously wondering what the fuck is going on. The road up ahead curves and the trees block our view of what's ahead. I see red light coming through the trees, and we figure we're close to civilization again. We finished the curve, and I realized that the red light is coming from the moon. This was no ordinary moon. It covered the entire sky. It was so close, you could see all the craters easily. They were filled with what appeared to be blood. Some of them appeared to be overflowing with blood and leading to rivers of blood. The best way I can describe this is to imagine a volcano spewing blood. I'm watching all this while driving in silence. I say to myself the food must have been drugged, or that I was having a mental breakdown. I tell myself I'm not going to mention what I'm seeing, drop my friend home, and then drive myself to the hospital. As I'm observing the bloody moon that appears so close that it will crash into Earth, I'm pondering what's wrong with me. After several minutes of silence, my friend says to me, "We're going to die." I ask him why he would say that, and he looks at me and says, "Don't you see the moon? It's covered in blood, and it's going to crash and kill us all." Believe it or not, when he said this, I felt a huge sense of relief, because at least I'm not hallucinating. We both can't see the same hallucination at the same time. I tell him the truth about why I stayed silent when I saw it. I described what I saw, and he points out various parts of the moon, and we both quickly come to the conclusion that we're looking at the same thing. Oddly enough, we are calm. I explain that I don't believe that we're looking at the moon, because if it was truly as close as it appeared, we would experience its gravitational effect. We both agreed that death is at hand. Some time passes, and the road has another steep curve. The trees block out the sky, and the red light from the moon continues to shine from them. After driving through the curve, the woods abruptly end. I stop the car, and we both look behind us. The bloody moon is gone. I tell my friend this doesn't make sense, and we need to go back into the woods. He refuses and demands to be dropped off at his home. I drop him off and duplicate the drive I made earlier to get back to the moon. I couldn't even find the woods again. The exit to Grand Avenue didn't lead to the same place as before. For the next several days, I drove around and go through Yahoo Maps and MapQuest to try to find the woods, but I could not find anything close enough to be a candidate. We both talk about it to this day, and we still try to find some meaning in it. My friend was more open to people about what he saw than me, and people tended to think he was crazy or really religious. I stayed relatively silent because I know no one would believe me. My husband and I have been on our wedding anniversary for over a week now. We have a camper in Cherokee, North Carolina that we've been staying in. We have an interest in abandoned things like towns and cemeteries. We decided that we would go visit Connor Cemetery near Couch's Creek off of Newfound Gap Road, which is about 1.9 from the Oconolofty Visitor Center. When we arrive to a pull-off close to where the trailhead is supposed to be, we get out and start walking towards the opening in the woods where there is a trail. The trail itself is visible, but you would have to be looking for it. We're walking in, heading towards where the cemetery is supposed to be. I'm in the front, looking down, checking for snakes and holes, and my husband is behind me. We paused for a second, and he said, "Babe, look at the statue." I start looking around and say where, and he points to the direction. What I was expecting was like an angel statue that you normally see in cemeteries. That is not what it was. I look further up the trail, and off to the side is what looks to be a 12 to 15-foot deer/elk statue. The statue looks like it was either made of wood or wrapped in leather hide and looked preserved. The problem is that nowhere online had it mentioned this statue or anything of the sort. It starts giving me this uneasy feeling because it had a strange face, and it was just a very weird place for something like that to be there. My husband then said that he did not like it at all, and that we should get going. As soon as he said that, we turned around and left as fast as possible. Once we got back to our car, I told him that it did not feel right at all. He agreed with me and said that he saw a deer-like face with no snout, and he thinks that it had blinked and that its right ear had moved, but not like a normal animal ear, but with a full 360 rotation. I told him what I saw was like an elk body with a camel mixed with an elk-like face. On the way back to our camper, I started thinking that I should have taken a picture of it, but unfortunately, I didn't think of that at the time. Once we were back at the camper, we started researching things, and we could not find where this was listed, and we weren't sure if this was even seen before. We decided to go back to a local Native American bookstore that we'd gone to previously, and we spoke to the older lady who runs it. We had explained what had happened, and she advised us to speak to the visitor center in the national park to see if anyone had something similar, or if they knew of any native stories of something similar. She had also said that sometimes the things choose for you to be the only ones to see it. We had thanked the lady and left back to our camper. Now here I am, typing this out, and thinking about what we could have possibly seen out there in the middle of the woods. If you have any information on this, could you please let me know? We will be going to the visitor center tomorrow, and most likely we'll be going back into the woods to see if it's still there or not. Last night, my boyfriend and I were headed home and got a flat tire. This was around midnight and we were on a highway, so we immediately got off at an exit in the middle of nowhere, and he got to changing the tire. It was dark. The only light we had were the headlights and our phones. I was very paranoid, and I kept telling my boyfriend I heard things and I feel weird because it was so lonely, but we shook it off with me just being paranoid. The whole time we were there, I felt so paranoid and anxious, but my boyfriend was trying to calm me down so he could just change the tire and leave. I was on the lookout with my flashlight the whole time. Finally, after 30 minutes of being out there, he was finished with the tire. He told me to put something up in the car, and as soon as I went back to him, he yelled at me to get the fuck in the car, and I immediately got in and was just in full panic mode. The whole car was moving from the trunk, and I just heard banging. I kept trying to look back and forth to see where my boyfriend was, and if I saw someone. But honestly, it's such a blur, I can't even remember most of it anymore. Thankfully, my boyfriend immediately gets in the car, and we rush out of there. He proceeds to tell me that he had heard a whistle from a thorn bush in front of us, as if someone was calling to him. He also said he saw jeans and a body figure right behind it when he heard the whistle, and then he immediately picked up the flat tire and was forcing it in the trunk. We were terrified, and we still are, because we were at that location for 30 minutes, so I don't know if the person was just staring at us the whole time, but if that person was, why? Wouldn't they have done something by then? I wish I looked out when we left to see if there was any movement, or if I saw anyone, but we were just in full panic mode, and my boyfriend had chills all over his body. My boyfriend did say when he was forcibly closing the trunk that he grabbed the crowbar, but he didn't see anyone come out. The whole thing happened so fast and it was a blur, he didn't exactly see anything else. I truly do believe he saw something, because he felt like it was a life or death situation, and that his body took a screenshot. We aren't sure what that whistle was, but we're thankful nothing happened, and we're definitely not going to stop in the middle of nowhere at night, ever again. A friend said that it could have been his guardian angel looking out for him from that whistle to leave immediately. But yeah, this was definitely the scariest experience we've had. I'm not even sure why I'm writing this. Therapy didn't help. Talking to my mom just gets me a blank stare and don't talk about that stuff. I haven't been back to my hometown in 8 years, and I never will be again. My dad was the sheriff of a small county in western North Carolina for close to 25 years. I won't name the county, not because I'm worried you'll find me, but because I don't think it matters. You've probably driven through a place like it. Population maybe 6,000. A gas station, a Dollar General, and lots of trees. I grew up thinking my dad was the toughest, smartest man alive. The kind of guy who knew everybody by name, could walk into a room and settle a fight just by clearing his throat. He was fair, honest, and he never missed church unless he was on call. People respected him. But there was always something in his demeanor, like a part of him was wound too tight, and he was afraid if he let go, it would all unravel. He drank, but never too much. He didn't talk about work at home, and he hated the woods. I mean hated them. Kind of strange for a mountain sheriff, right? We lived about 10 miles from the national forest boundary. My friends and I would ride bikes up and down those back roads, daring each other to go into the woods after dark. You know, typical rural kid stuff. But if I was out past sundown, even a minute, my dad would come looking for me like the house was on fire. I got grounded for a week one time because I went squirrel hunting with a buddy without telling him. And it wasn't the grounding that scared me. It was the look on his face, like he thought I was already gone. He died in 2017. Heart attack. It was sudden and a shock. My mom found him in the garage, slumped over the riding mower like he just leaned in for a nap. He was only 61. At the funeral, my mom asked me to help go through his office just to clean up, maybe donate his old uniforms to the local museum. It was a weird, quiet couple of days. A lot of framed awards, a shoebox full of old keys he'd never labeled, guns of course, a folded flag, and a filing cabinet in the closet, padlocked shut. The key was in his desk drawer, taped underneath. Inside the cabinet were maybe a dozen manila folders, all labeled the same way, 3-letter initials and a date. No notes, no case files, just names like JDW 1982 and RMC 1997. Underneath the folders, stuffed in the bottom drawer, was a hand-drawn map. It was on old paper, folded like a road atlas, starting to soften where it had been folded and unfolded many times. My dad had drawn our whole county by hand. Every ridgeline, every creek bed, every old fire road, and scattered throughout the forest were red X's, maybe 30 or 40 of them. No labels, no explanation of what the X's meant. Some were way off in the backcountry, miles from anything. A few were weirdly close to the town limits. In the corner of the map, in faded black ink, were 7 words. They don't go missing, they go back. At first, I thought maybe it was a tracker for missing persons. That would have made sense, right? Dad was a cop. People go missing sometimes. Maybe he was keeping his own records off the books. But when I brought it up to my mom, her face went slack, like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. She just said, "You need to burn that right now." I asked her why, and she just kept shaking her head and saying, "That was his burden, not yours." So I took the map and the folders and drove out to our fire pit, just down the hill from the house. I didn't even hesitate. I threw it all in. Everything but one folder I kept in my truck without really knowing why, and lit it up. The paper curled up fast, blackened, and turned to ash within seconds. All of it, except one thing. A small square of that old parchment, about the size of a business card, floated out of the fire and landed on my foot, completely untouched. It had a date written on it, April 12th, 1991, and below that, in my dad's blocky handwriting, AWR, my initials. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I kept telling myself it was a coincidence. Maybe Dad had meant someone else, a distant cousin, a stranger with the same initials. But that little square of paper didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt intentional, like a warning I didn't understand yet. The folder I kept, stuck in the back seat of my truck, was labeled LST 2004. That name didn't ring a bell, but I figured I owed it to myself to at least look through it. There wasn't much in it. A newspaper clipping about a 12-year-old girl named Leah Taylor, who vanished while camping with her family near the forest boundary. A Xerox of a missing person flyer. A handwritten note in my dad's handwriting. Father swears he saw her standing in the woods a week later, smiling. Wouldn't come when called. And one photo. It was a Polaroid, faded, maybe taken at dusk. It showed the tree line just off one of the Forest Service roads, and between 2 trees, barely visible if you weren't looking for it, was a small, pale face, just peeking out. I can't say for sure if it was Leah. Hell, I can't say it was even human, but something about that face made me want to put the folder back in the fire and never speak of it again. Instead, I started digging. Over the next few weeks, I spent every night researching old missing person reports from the county. Some were obvious accidents, car wrecks, drownings, even a couple that were solved years later. But a few stuck out. they weren't just missing, they vanished under weird circumstances. A hunter who went out with friends and was last seen walking into the woods to pee never came back, no trace found. A teenager who supposedly ran away from home but left his wallet, keys, and shoes behind. His mom swears she saw him outside the kitchen window 6 months later, just standing by the tree line. A man who was found naked and disoriented in the woods after being missing for 3 days. He kept repeating the phrase, "I heard them whispering." All these cases happened near red X's on my dad's map. I didn't have the original anymore, but I remembered enough of the layout to cross-check it against Google Earth. The clusters lined up, near old logging roads, near caves, near places with no cell service and no reason to be out there, unless you were looking to disappear. And here's the kicker. None of these cases made it past the local news. No FBI, no national spotlight, no Dateline specials, just quietly dropped, forgotten, or explained away as hikers getting lost. But my dad had been tracking them for decades. This is where it started getting bad. One Sunday, about a month after the funeral, I went to our old church, mostly to be with my mom, who still attended every week. Same old wooden pews, same hymns, same awkward hugs from people who didn't know what to say. But after the service, I noticed someone I'd never seen before. A man, maybe late 50s, wearing a too-tight dress shirt and slacks that didn't match, balding with these pale, watery eyes. He didn't talk to anyone, just stood by the back doors, hands folded like he was waiting. When we made eye contact, he smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was knowing. After I helped my mom into her car, I turned back to look for him, and he was gone. Later that night, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. A torn piece of paper that said, "You're looking in the wrong direction. It's not where they go, it's when." By early summer, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think about anything else. I was obsessed. I started going out to the forest roads near the X's I remembered, just to see if anything felt off. Most nights, nothing happened. But on June 12th, I drove out to an overgrown pull-off near an old fire break road. One I remembered being near the center of the map, marked with 3 X's all within a half-mile. I parked, killed the engine, and waited. It was quiet. No birds, no crickets. Even the wind felt like it had stopped. I sat for about 45 minutes before I saw it. Movement, maybe 30 yards into the tree line. Not fast, just slow and deliberate. I turned on my flashlight and walked a few paces in. There was a figure, back turned, maybe 100 feet away. Too small to be an adult, wearing what looked like a white dress or nightgown. I called out, "Hello, are you okay?" The figure didn't move. I called again, nothing. Then I took one step forward, and it turned to face me. It wasn't a child. I don't know how to explain what I saw. It looked like a child at first, same height, same frame, but its face was too long. Its eyes were too far apart, and the way it stood, like it didn't understand how to use its body. It smiled, and then it ran, not away, but sideways, impossibly fast, deeper into the woods, without making a single sound. I ran back to my truck, locked the doors, and peeled out of there so fast, I nearly tore off my bumper. After that night, I stopped sleeping altogether. Even during the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not by a person, or like the place itself was watching me. The woods weren't just quiet anymore. They were waiting. I tried telling myself it was a trick of the light, that my mind had finally snapped from stress. But deep down, I knew better. That thing I saw, it wasn't human. Or it was once, maybe. That's when I remembered the words from the map. They don't go missing, they go back. I kept turning that phrase over and over in my head. Go back to what? Back in time, back to something older, back to where they came from. And then I remembered the note left on my windshield at the church. It's not where they go, it's when. I started wondering, what if the people who disappeared weren't dead? What if they weren't taken by some cryptid or cult or serial killer? What if they went somewhere else? What if the forest wasn't a place? It was a door. A door that only opens under the right conditions. A door that wants you to come through, and once you do, you're not lost. You're back. I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back to my mom's place and told her I needed to know everything. I told her I knew about the map, the disappearances, the red X's. I even told her about the pale figure in the woods. She didn't say a word for a long time, just sat at the kitchen table, hands folded like she was in church. Then she got up, went into the hall closet, and came back with a small wooden lockbox I'd never seen before. She slid it across the table. This was the one folder he kept out of the cabinet. She said, I don't know why, but he said if anything ever happened to him, you needed to see it, and then you needed to burn it. I opened the box. Inside was a single manila envelope labeled AWR, April 12th, 1991. My initials, my birthday. Inside were 3 things. A photo of me as a baby, bundled in a blanket, sitting outside what looked like a ranger station. A printed email chain between my dad and someone at the police station, dated 2004. It mentioned a boy found wandering near Chimney Top Trail. Roughly age 3, no ID, no match in missing persons databases. The state offered to quietly close the case and allow local custody due to family interest. A handwritten note from my dad. He came back. Not the same, not at first, but he grew into himself. Maybe it needed a piece of him. Maybe it gave something back. I don't know, but I couldn't leave him out there. He's my son. I sat there for what felt like hours, shaking, cold, because if I was found in the woods at 3 years old, where the hell was I before that? I don't know how much of this story you'll believe. If I read it a year ago, I'd think the person writing it was either unhinged or trying to sell a screenplay. But I'm telling you this because I can feel it happening again. Whatever it is, I dream about the woods every night now. Not just about being there, belonging there, like it's calling me home. I see the trees swaying in rhythm, even when there's no wind. I hear faint voices when I leave the windows open. Sometimes, when I wake up, there's dirt on my feet. Last week, I found a small red X scratched into the bark of the oak tree outside my apartment. I live in a suburb now, nowhere near North Carolina. It doesn't matter. It found me anyway. I know I can't run. My dad tried. That map was his attempt to understand it, maybe to stop it, but he couldn't, because they don't go missing. They go back. And I think I'm about to go back too. If you're reading this, don't come looking. Don't go into the woods alone. If you see a figure in white, don't speak to it. And whatever you do, don't answer if something whispers your name. The fire is burning low, which means that is all we have for tonight. However you are spending the rest of the weekend, thank you for joining me. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe before you go. And if you're ready to drift off, remember, you can find all my content over on Spotify and Patreon. Until next time, good night.